in which our happy couples learn that life is not easy, whether as newlyweds or as recent divorcees. Chapter 29. For Anna, one of the objects of the trip to Russia was to see her son. Since the day she left Italy, the thought of seeing him had not ceased to excite her, and the closer she came to Petersburg, the greater became the joy and significance of this meeting for her. She never asked herself the question of how to arrange it. To her it seemed natural and simple to see her son when she was in the same town with him. But on arriving in Petersburg, she suddenly saw her present position in society clearly and realized that it would be difficult to arrange the meeting. She had already been in Petersburg for 2 days. The thought of her son had never left her for a moment, but she still had not seen him. She felt she did not have the right to go directly to the house where she might encounter Alexey Alexandrovitch. She might be insulted and turned away. As for writing and entering into relations with her husband, it was painful even to think of it. She could be at peace only when not thinking of her husband. To find out when and where her son went for his walks and see him then was not enough for her. She had been preparing so long for this meeting. She had so much to tell him. She wanted so much to embrace him, to kiss him. Seryozha's old nanny might have helped her and instructed her, but the nanny no longer lived in Alexey Alexandrovitch's house. In these hesitations and in the search for the nanny, 2 days passed. Learning of the close relations between Alexey Alexandrovitch and Countess Lydia Ivanovna, Anna decided on the 3rd day to write her letter, which cost her great effort, in which she said deliberately that permission to see her son depended on her husband's magnanimity. She knew that if her husband were shown the letter, he, pursuing his role of magnanimity, would not refuse her. The messenger who had carried the letter brought her a most cruel and unexpected reply, that there would be no reply. She had never felt so humiliated as in that moment when, having summoned the messenger, she heard from him a detailed account of how he had waited, and how he had been then told there will be no reply. Anna felt herself humiliated, offended, but she saw that from her own point of view Countess Lydia Ivanovna was right. Her grief was the stronger because it was solitary. She could not and did not want to share it with Vronsky. She knew that for him, though he was the chief cause of her unhappiness, the question of her meeting her son would be a most unimportant thing. She knew that he would never be able to understand all the depth of her suffering. She knew that she would hate him for his cold tone at the mention of it. She feared that more than anything in the world, and so she concealed everything from him that had to do with her son. She spent the whole day at home, inventing means for meeting her son, and arrived at the decision to write to her husband. She was already working on the letter when Lydia Ivanovna's letter was brought to her. The Countess' silence had humbled and subdued her, but the letter, everything she could read between its lines, annoyed her so much, its malice seemed so outrageous compared with her passionate and legitimate tenderness for her son, that she became indignant with him and stopped accusing herself. This coldness is a pretense of feeling, she said to herself. All they want is to offend me and torment the child, and I should submit to them. Not for anything. She's worse than I am. At least I don't lie. And she decided then and there that the next day, Seryosha's birthday itself, she would go directly to her husband's house, bribe the servants, deceive them, but at all costs see her son and destroy the ugly deceit with which they surrounded the unfortunate child. She went to a toy store, bought lots of toys, and thought over her plan of action. She would come early in the morning at 8 o'clock, when it was certain that Alexey Alexandrovitch would not be up yet. She would have money with her, which she would give to the hall porter and the footman so that they would let her in, and without lifting her veil she would tell them she had come from Seryosha's godfather to wish him a happy birthday, and had been charged with putting the toys by the boy's bed. The only thing she did not prepare was what she should say to her son. However much she thought about it, she could not think of anything. The next day, at 8 o'clock in the morning, Anna got out of a hired carriage by herself and rang at the big entrance of her former home. "Go and see what she wants. It's some lady," said Kapitonich, not dressed yet, in a coat and galoshes, looking out of the window at a lady in a veil who was standing just at the door. The porter's helper, a young fellow Anna did not know, opened the door for her. She came in and, taking a 3-ruble bill from her muff, hurriedly put it into his hand. "Seryosha, Sergei Alexeyevich," she said, and started forward, having examined the bill. The porter's helper stopped her at the inside glass door. "Who do you want?" he asked. She did not hear his words, and made no reply. Noticing the unknown woman's perplexity, Kapitonich himself came out to her, let her in the door, and asked what she wanted. "I've come from Prince Skorodumov to see Sergei Alexeyevich," she said. "He's not up yet," the porter said, looking at her intently. Anna had never expected that the totally unchanged interior of the front hall of the house, in which she had lived for 9 years, would affect her so strongly. One after another, joyful and painful memories arose in her soul, and for a moment she forgot why she was there. "Would you care to wait?" said Kapitonich, helping her off with her fur coat. After taking her coat, Kapitonich looked into her face, recognized her, and silently made a low bow. "Please come in, Your Excellency," he said to her. She wanted to say something, but her voice refused to produce any sound. Giving the old man a look of guilty entreaty, she went up the stairs with quick, light steps. All bent over, his galoshes tripping on the steps, Kapitonich ran after her, trying to head her off. "The tutor's there, and may not be dressed. I'll announce you." Anna went on up the familiar stairs, not understanding what the old man was saying. "Here to the left, please. Excuse the untidiness. He's in the former sitting room now," the porter said breathlessly. "Allow me just a moment, Your Excellency. I'll begin," he said, and getting ahead of her, he opened the tall door and disappeared behind it. Anna stood waiting. "He's just woken up," the porter said, coming out the door again. And as the porter said it, Anna heard the sound of a child's yawn. From the sound of the yawn alone, she recognized her son, and could see him alive before her. "Let me in, go away," she said, and went through the tall doorway. To the right of the door stood a bed, and on the bed a boy sat upright in nothing but an unbuttoned shirt, his little body arched, stretching and finishing a yawn. As his lips came together, they formed themselves into a blissfully sleepy smile, and with that smile he slowly and sweetly fell back again. "Seryosha," she whispered, approaching him inaudibly. While they had been apart, and with that surge of love she had been feeling all the time recently, she had imagined him as a 4-year-old boy. the way she had loved him most. Now he was not even the same as when she had left him. He was still further from being a 4-year-old, was taller and thinner. What was this? How thin his face was, how short his hair, how long his arms. How had he changed since she left him? But this was he, with his shape of head, his lips, his soft neck and broad shoulders. "Seryosha," she repeated just over the child's ear. He propped himself on his elbow, turned his tousled head from side to side as if looking for something, and opened his eyes. For several seconds he gazed quietly and questioningly at his mother standing motionless before him, then suddenly smiled blissfully and, closing his sleepy eyes again, fell, not back now, but towards her arms. "Seryosha, my sweet boy," she said, choking and putting her arms around his plump body. "Mama," he said, moving under her arms so as to touch them with different parts of his body. Smiling sleepily, his eyes still shut, he shifted his plump hands from the back of the bed to her shoulders, snuggled up to her, enveloping her with that sweet, sleepy smell and warmth that only children have, and began rubbing his face against her neck and shoulders. "I knew it," he said, opening his eyes. "Today's my birthday. I knew you'd come. I'll get up now." And he was falling asleep again as he said it. Anna looked him over greedily. She saw how he had grown and changed during her absence. She did and did not recognize his bare feet, so big now, sticking out from under the blanket. Recognized those cheeks, thinner now, those locks of hair cut short on the back of his neck, where she had so often kissed them. She touched it all and could not speak. Tears choked her. "What are you crying for, Mama?" he said, now wide awake. "Mama, what are you crying for?" He raised his tearful voice. I won't cry. I'm crying from joy. I haven't seen you for so long. I won't, she said, swallowing her tears and turning away. "Well, it's time you got dressed," she added after a pause, recovering herself, and, without letting go of his hand, she sat by his bed on a chair where his clothes were lying ready. "How do you get dressed without me? How—" She wanted to begin talking simply and cheerfully, but could not, and turned away again. "I don't wash with cold water. Papa told me not to. And did you see Vasily Lukitch? He'll come. And you sat on my clothes." Seryosha burst out laughing. She looked at him and smiled. "Mamma, darling, dearest," he cried, rushing to her again and embracing her. As if it were only now, seeing her smile, they understood clearly what had happened. "No need for that," he said, taking her hat off, and as if seeing her anew without a hat, he again began kissing her. "But what have you been thinking about me? You didn't think I was dead. I never believed it. Didn't you, my love? I knew it. I knew it." He repeated his favorite phrase, and, seizing her hand, which was caressing his hair, he pressed her palm to his mouth and began to kiss it. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.